What about the truth?
What truth? What is the truth?
The Boys has been one of Amazon's best series, so whether you're a fan of The Boys or want to explore which moments and story arcs were far too distasteful to even include on the silver screen, then stay tuned, as we're about to take a look at the biggest differences between both the show and the comic book origins. Before we get into the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, as well as turn on post notifications so that way you don't miss anything we put out there. Rule 63 Swap. According to the folklore of the internet age, Rule 63 states that there will be a gender-swapped version of a character somewhere on the internet, and if you haven't found it, you'll just have to look a little harder. And when it comes to The Boys, you don't have to look very hard to find some examples of this rule in practice. Elizabeth Shue, for example, portrays a formidable high-ranking executive of Vought International who goes by the name of Madeline Stillwell. This role is incredibly important and shows the complex relationship between Homelander and authority, with Madeline often treating him like her child in a number of, well, uncomfortable situations. But what if we had told you that Madeline Stillwell was actually a gender swap version of another character from the original source material known as James Stillwell? Although James does serve as more of a hands-on assistant than Madeline, there's no doubting her origin as seen by their shared names. Season 2 of The Boys also saw the introduction of Stormfront, who throughout the season was shown to be a former Nazi superhero named Liberty, whose real name was Clara Risinger. Taking a look at the original source material, however, and you will see that Homefront was in fact the male superhero which served as the leader of another superhero group called Payback. It looks like the showrunners kept the recognizable name and designation as first superhero to be credited with Compound V, but ended up changing next to everything else in a Rule 63 twist that nobody expected. The real Homelander. Amazon Prime's shot at Homelander as portrayed by the talented Antony Starr is a great one, with his portrayal introducing him as the powerful amalgamation of Captain America and Superman. What the character lacks in self-confidence, however, he more than makes up for in brutality, being responsible for some of the worst events that we have yet to see in the history of television. And while the same can be said about the Homelander we see in the comic book origins of The Boys, it's the reason for his behavior that Amazon Prime decided to change. In the television series that we see, for the most part, Homelander is a weak-minded individual who appears to be controlled by Vought International to a large degree. While it was Madeline who took control of the brutal superhero in season 1, it was Stormfront who ended up taking on that mantle throughout the second season. Whoever it was though, Homelander was able to be manipulated into doing certain things because of his desire to be loved by the broader public. In the comic book series, things are a little different, with Homelander being the maker of his own destiny. All of the atrocious things that he did was born from purely murderous intent, or absolute boredom. Regardless of which version you're staring down though, one would definitely not want to be able to get in his way. Beckys Fate. According to the rules of superhero writing, an origin story must always adhere to two simple rules. First of all, the superhero must be given some kind of superpower, be it incredible strength or the mind to come up with gadgets to aid him whenever fighting crime. Second of all, there needs to be some kind of tragic event that ends up setting the hero's path in motion to heroism. The only thing that really sets superheroes and villains apart is the fact that the villains use their superpowers to fulfill their own selfish needs, not really caring for the consequences of their actions. The Boys decides to flip these rules on their sides by presenting us with the idea of the Seven as a group of superheroes who act far too similarly to villains than to the heroes of the public that they believe that they are. Billy Butcher and the Boys, on the other hand, were all put on the path to stop these unstoppable heroes by some other tragic event in their past. For Billy, this was the death of his wife, who in the source material was sexually assaulted by Homelander, which resulted in Billy waking up one morning to her ripped open and a newborn super baby floating around above her corpse. In true The Boys fashion, Butcher had to then fight some newly born infant, finally beating it to death with the use of a lamp. Since beating babies isn't really something that can be showed on television, the showrunners decided to change things up a bit, by at least keeping Rebecca alive after the pregnancy and having her raise this superpowered son of hers in isolation under the protection and surveillance of Vought International. Different soup teams and heroes. While the Amazon Prime show hints at the fact that other superhero teams manufactured throughout the injection Compound V do exist in the broader world, the real focus is mainly on the Seven and how the Boys are trying to bring them down because of Billy Billy's rage towards Homelander. In the source material, however, Billy and his boys don't start off by going after the Seven directly. In a far more sensible fashion, the team of superhero destroyers decide to first go after a few teams of supes that are a bit easier to handle. A great example of teams that we meet in the comic books is called Super Duper and is basically comprised of a number of small-time superheroes who, rather than save the world, decide to do medial tasks, like rescue cats from trees. Another incredible hero team is called the G-Men, which is essentially a satirical look at Professor Xavier's X-Men in the Marvel comic verse. But you might be surprised to hear that one of the most perverted members of the Seven that Amazon decided to concentrate on throughout the season 1 of the show was actually completely made up by the showrunners and writers. We're of course talking about Translucent, who never actually existed in the source material for The Boys. It must also be said that Ezekiel, the leader of the Capes for Christ initiative, never existed in the comics, along with his power to stretch like Mr. Fantastic. Take a look at the source material and you will find a similar character, though, who does take the name of Oh Father, but due to the fact that Oh Father in the comics was portrayed as a pedophile which frequently slept with 12-year-old kids, Amazon decided to go with a brighter version instead. Getting in deep. After giving Starlight one of the most inappropriate welcomes to the Seven, it didn't take long for audiences to start to hate the Deep, who then deservedly fell on some hard times himself, essentially being sent to the minor leagues to act as a promotional hero more than anything else. As you would have noticed, by watching both seasons, the showrunners of the Amazon Prime show made sure to explain to the audience as to why the Deep was such a terrible human, with a constant process of belittlement by the other heroes, leading to his own issues with authority and self-identity. Surprisingly enough, however, the Deep in the source material not only looks nothing like the Deep that we've come to know, he also appears to be a completely different person altogether. You see, the aquatic hero in the Boys comic really doesn't care less what other heroes, or even the general public for that matter, think of him. All that concerns the terribly dressed hero is how much money he is making by doing the various things that he's asked to do for Vought. Eric Kripe definitely made the right choice by changing the Deep into the hero that we know him now, as he is turning out to be far more interesting than what we would have seen in the source material. A different female. Another character that we saw a change for the better is Amazon Prime's own version of the female, who later becomes known as Frenchie's love interest, Kimiko. You might remember Kimiko as being one of the first adult recipients of Compound V, which resulted in her being caged like an animal after inheriting a useful amount of super dexterity and strength. As it turned out, these experiments on her were being offered by Vought, who wanted to release superpowered terrorists in the world in order to ensure that the company would be given military contracts. The only thing that can stop a super terrorist is a superhero, after all. While the female doesn't exist in the source material and, like Kimiko, decides to work alongside the Boys to bring the Seven and Vought International to an end, it's her origin story that's changed drastically. According to the comics, the female was actually introduced to her superpowers once she had accidentally fallen into a vat of Japan's own version of Compound V. From this mistaken dip, she not only inherited super strength, but an urge to kill anyone and everything that she got her hands on. Milking her urge to kill based on how she was treating makes Frenchie's eventual turn of her through his own powers of love and support an incredible arc on its own. So we're happy the showrunners decided to make the change. But what do you think about it, guys? How do you like the differences between the source material and the show? Would you have preferred something way more in line with the comics? Feel free to let us know in the comment section down below. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later.